Kirby.
That seems like a bad plan. All right, so everybody, thanks for coming. This is our March 2016 meetup. For those who haven't met us, I am Chris McCuller. That's Cameron Thompson, Cam Thompson. That's Patrick Dougal. We help run the, yeah, I've pronounced it right. I want to call you Dougal for some reason. You're not a French general, so. We help run this thing, so thanks everybody for coming out. We've been going now for a year and a half, almost strong.
Really?
Yeah. November was a year, so this is about a year and a half, ish. We're getting into big boy land. So, but thanks for coming out. There's our Twitter, there's our website, there's a 4-leaf clover because it's March. Ha ha ha. That's what we got here. So we have sponsors, and they help us do things and make this thing awesome. First sponsor is Big Nerd Ranch, which is the building we're in now. There's a good description of Big Nerd. They do custom mobile apps. They teach some stuff, and they write books. Like that guy just wrote a book that's going to be on Amazon. You should check out for front-end development.
In a month. From tomorrow. That's really scary.
Is that freaky?
Please plug your book.
What'd you write?
Plug your book.
Oh, I'm co-author. We've been developing a course for Big Nerd Ranch for just front-end development. And so one of our boot camps is a 5-day course that spans all of front-end development.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. We started doing some style stuff. By the third day, you're doing node and build stuff. On the 4th day is my chapters, which is like a basic introduction to Ember. And so, yeah, the book is just...
And on the 5th day, you create man?
yeah. I mean, Johnny 5 comes alive. Yeah, we actually should. That'd be really funny. Yeah. We use Johnny 5 on the 5th day. But it's a JavaScript front-end book. So yeah, it's been fun to create.
Yeah, if you're interested in opportunities at Big Nerd, talk to Mr. Dougal or Mr. Gandy over there. They can help you out. Or Sebastian.
Yeah.
Next sponsor is Simple Photo, which is Cam's employer. They cover our meetup fees and just generally do fun things for us. Cam, you want to?
Leading e-commerce system is important. I like it.
I copied that from the website. If it's wrong, you can edit it if you want to.
Yeah, if any of you take a lot of pictures, get at me. We'll sell them for you. All right.
Yeah, so the last one is Pardot, which is who I work for. We are a subsidiary of Salesforce, and we do B2B marketing. So if you're a business and you get spam, it's potentially from us. A business, though. Not, I mean, it's what we do. I'm sorry.
It's what we do. We spam you.
Businesses, not people.
You at least make it a little more enjoyable. Put a joke or something, or do something.
It's a fun place to work. I love it. The beers.
We actually could reduce our little statement. We actually got a mission statement and a vision statement today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We did. Today it landed.
I'll give you access to the slides. You can update it and make it.
You got shipping that vision statement.
We're in the process of doing the same thing. It's called a V2 Mom.
What?
Yeah. It starts at the top and moves it all the way down. So from Benioff all the way down to me, everybody has one of these things.
Our mission statement.
Yep.
What jobs are like?
This is why you like.
You know, I was.
Every like 100 people you add, you like start quadrupling or like whatever the work. You're like, that feature looks like 2 weeks. No, it's really 6 months. We had our vision statement meeting and.
So.
Wait, what's your vision statement? Can you say?
I heard what the general idea was. The product that I work on is like #1 for us. Like it's the very top of the list of the things that we work on. So that's fun. But yeah, I was really skeptical. I was like, this seems like corporate stupid crap. But it's actually kind of handy. Like it kind of helps guide you, and then we reset like every quarter. So it's kind of cool. It's useful, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe I've just been swallowed up by the corporate monster, and now I'm just spouting everything back out. But it's a good place to work. We have lots of fun. Hunter was an intern there for a little bit.
Yeah, I did a V2 Mom.
Did you do a V2 Mom?
I did a V2 Mom. From Benioff all the way down to the lowly intern in Atlanta.
Yeah. It's an interesting process. It's a good place to work. That's a lot of fun. We have ping pong. We have mini motos. We have beer. We had cake and pie today because it was Salesforce's 17th anniversary. So if you're interested in coming to,
Birthday Salesforce.
I was not at work today.
How many years? 17?
17.
Wow.
First software as a service, right?
Yeah.
Pioneered the whole thing.
They invented SaaS. Woo! So if you're interested, come have a chat, and we're always hiring. We are always looking for presenters. Always, always, always. If you're doing cool things with Ember, we'd love to hear about it. If you're having a hard time with Ember, we'd love to hear about it too. We've done several group debugging sessions where somebody's had a problem and they just get up here and be like, this is the problem I'm running into. Can you help? And we walk through the process with them, and I think most of them we solved, but not all of them. I don't think we did super well with Jim's thing, but we gave him some direction. But either way, if you're doing fun stuff or having a hard time, either way, come give a talk, and we're always willing to listen or help. We have a website, atlantaember.io. It is open source. We have a Rails backend and an Ember front end, and if you want to contribute to either, there is the GitHub URL. We have all kinds of fun things going on. We're trying to get the Meetup API integrated to show you fun, or I guess not fun, but the next Meetup and where it is and what's going on. We're going to have a thing for suggestions, so if you want to hear something about a talk, you can put something on there and a few other ideas. So if you have a good idea, submit a PR. And it's also a good way to learn kind of what a mostly idiomatic Ember app looks like. We try to keep it up to date with stuff. So we have a project night that we just started. We just had our second one a couple of weeks ago. Greg heads that thing up. And you can come hang out, you can work on the website, you can work on your own thing, or you can just come and drink beer or coffee. It's going to be March 30th, I believe. Are we settling on the last Wednesday of the month?
When's EmberCon?
The day before.
Oh yeah, that probably won't work then. So it probably won't be March 30th.
That might be the last night of the con.
Yeah, that is the last night of conference, 29th, 30th, yeah. I just looked on the calendar for the last Wednesday.
TBD.
So yeah, either the Wednesday before or the Wednesday after, I don't know. But it's generally speaking the last Wednesday-ish of the month, and it's Tap Room in Kirkwood.
Next year, if we're still a company.
That's confident.
Real problem.
But yeah, it's fun. We have a good time when we go out there. We crashed GitHub our first night. That was fun.
Everybody npm install right now.
No, that's just how you quit. That's
Bower's broken? Like, what's going on?
non-bomb at a coffee shop. It's like the coffee shop mic drop. Like, I'm out. You just crash the Wi-Fi. Now you leave.
The entire conference being installed. It'd be really fun to do in the talk.
Who all has heard of EmberConf? Everybody, cool. Who all's going to EmberConf? 1, 2, 3 of us going. I think there's a few more outside of the people that are here. If you haven't been, it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. It's a single track conference. Although this year there's like one session that's multi-track. That's Kelly's session. They split into two. Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a good conference.
She presenting today?
No.
She just sent me her outline, so.
Probably not.
Speaking of this though, if you are one of the three of us going to EmberCon, I'm in a Slack channel just in case we need to organize stuff or when we're out there. It's probably
We need to
easier.
organize stuff.
Okay, yeah. We'll take this offline. We'll put it in the parking lot.
using your big company words. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a great conference. I went last year and it was a blast, and obviously going back this year, and it's still going to be a blast, I'm sure. There's always really good fun announcements too. So the EmberConf folks actually emailed us and asked to mention this at the next meetup. So there's a drive for translating the Ember documentation into other languages. Right now it's in English, and the guy behind it, he is @Locks on Twitter. I think it's Ricardo Mendez is his name. It's the guy that's heading it up. And they want to translate, I think the initial set is Spanish, Japanese, and maybe German or French was the initial goal. but if you go to that link, it will tell you what the language they need help with, and they're aiming to get the initial set of translations done by EmberComp. So if you know any of those languages, or you click on that link and know any of those languages, or know somebody that knows those languages and want to get them to help, the community will be greatly appreciative of it. The docs have gotten a whole heck of a lot better, and getting it translated will be a good thing. So there's the open source PSA. Is there any announcements? Is anybody doing any hiring? Besides Pardot's hiring. Are y'all hiring? No? You may be.
I don't think so.
Okay. We're always hiring, so if you're interested, come have a chat with me and we can work something out. Is there anybody that looking to be hired, looking for a job? Nope. Alrighty. Anybody just freaking excited about something and want to say something? I know Spring Greg over there is excited today.
I'm saving it for my talk.
Oh, okay. Well,
I have something unrelated. I took, I don't think I could do the talk here, but it's all CSS. I have a layout that goes from Flexbox to tables with the same element. So that I totally just won the internet for about 20 years.
yeah, but do you want the internet from now to 20 years from now, or for now?
I mean, like, it took from 1990s to 2016 pretty quick. Or it goes backwards in times if you're doing mobile first. So it's Flexbox, then tables for desktop.
Nice.
I couldn't do the desktop layout in Flexbox because of the entire row system needed to be a table so that all the columns lined up because they were all different widths. So the container is a table with table rows and table cells, but at a small size, they're Flexbox.
I can't decide if you've put web development forward or backwards 20 years.
I don't know, but it worked without two different sets of elements.
Wasn't that the world before? It was like, oh, I don't know how to get it to work right. I'm just going to make it a table?
Yes. Yep.
All right. I'll be interested to see that just so I can rack on it.
We use tables. Tables get a bad rap. But we also on mobile we do transform those elements into different kinds of elements.
Yeah, tables are very useful for tabular data, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but not for layout. Anyway.
It's a hot take.
So we have an announcement. Our schedule is going to alter slightly next month. Instead of the second Tuesday of the month, we're going to be on April 4th, which is a Monday. We're going to be participating in a global Ember Meetup. And so for those of you who don't know what the global Ember Meetup is, it's an online meetup organized by some folks in the Ember community where you get talks from a wider range of people. I think the next one coming up, Alex Matchneer is doing an Ember concurrency talk. There was a talk by Tom Dale, the past one on Fastboot. There's been a bunch of add-on stuff. So it's always a super good meetup to just log in and watch and see what's going on. And they're wanting to get more communities involved. And so they asked everybody on the East Coast that was able to hop in and participate. So we're going to alter our schedule just a little bit next month. Look for... Once we get the formal announcement from the Global Ember Meetup people, we'll send out the meetup invite so that folks know what's going on. But I think it's going to be pretty cool just to participate in something a little bit larger than our community and be in a bigger group of people. I think Boston's in. I think Philly's going to be in. So it'll be pretty cool. And I think that's it. That is it, because my slides aren't announcing anymore. So who's going first, Cam or Greg?
He says he wants to go first.
All right. You doing LTS?
Yeah. So it's less of a talk and more of a PSA, but
So Greg's going to give us the lowdown on the new Ember LTS releases.
thanks.
Let's hope this works this time.
I'll
Don't have to restart my computer.
All right. Cool. Okay.
All right. So Ember announced that they're going to start supporting a LTS release, which is a long-term support. Is anybody here planning on getting onto that release cycle?
Probably.
Yeah? Okay. So I just wanted to, this is all available in more detail in the blog, but some of the highlights I just took out of that. So I'm just going to read this quote. So they're saying, by synchronizing the timing that these users upgrade, and these users being like, I think more corporate-y type users that can't update their application every 6 weeks, the community can decide to focus energy on specific versions rather than a scattershot attempt to support every possible combination. So this idea is, if the release is shorter, or not shorter, if the release, like the LTS goes for 24 weeks, that gives people more opportunity to target a specific thing, and they don't have to worry about upgrading their add-ons or whatever else every 6 weeks, and having backward support for these 6-week releases. And they're saying that it should result in more consistent support and easier upgrades for users on the LTS channel. Just some details about that. 2.4 will be the first LTS release. And the way that they're going to do it is that it will ship 6 weeks after the stable version. So LTS 2.4 will ship when 2.5 ships in 6 weeks. And then they're going to do releases every 4 releases, so every approximately 24 weeks. Which means that the next LTS release will come out when 2.9 comes out. So one of the nice things is that they're going to support critical bug fixes for 6 release cycles, so that's like 36 weeks. So basically an LTS release and a half. And then they're also going to do security patches for 10 release cycles, which is 60 weeks, which is a long time. They had a list of guarantees. One of the guarantees was that they would have security patches for the latest 2 LTSs. And of course, all of the stable versions the latest stable version will have the patches. They also promised strong documentation and links and code examples for when you need to go from one LTS release to the next. And that might be difficult, but and then also they promised to deprecate any private APIs for at least one LTS release before it gets removed. So that gives people that can't upgrade their application every 6 weeks more time to adapt, and that is also important for add-on writers. They had some recommendation for add-on authors, and that they should support the latest LTS release, and then they should track the changes to the stable releases. So that means that hopefully the add-on community will be more consistent with their support, and they can say, well, we're supporting 2.4 LTS, and maybe they don't necessarily stick with the stable releases, though they should. People can expect them to support LTS. And then another note, I don't know if anybody's using Ember legacy views or Ember legacy controllers, but 2.4 LTS is probably the last release that's going to support those.
Those are what, the public view and then the object array controller?
I think so, yes. They are scheduled to be dropped, I think, in 2.6 maybe of the stable release. And then last thing is that I saw on there's a Ember community survey, which I took earlier, and it's going to provide them some excellent information, so I recommend everybody take that.
There's a lot of good stuff that came out of it last year.
Oh, so yeah, so they're probably going to present that information. Yeah,
That's the results of the conference.
Cool.
I'll tweet out a link from the Atlanta.
I was curious, why is your company going on to the LTS release?
First off, I haven't done anything in it in a year.
Oh, okay.
So a long-term release cycle really kind of made
makes sense to me. At
Yeah.
least stability before I start, you know, I probably won't stay on it that long. I'll probably move on after a while, but it makes sense to me to kind of get started, get busy,
Yeah.
get productive, and then move to the more agile and yet, what did they do? Cycle.
Yeah. Some of the releases, some of the stable releases have been comfortable. I know that moving from from the 1x to 2x was a chore, but yeah, I can see that. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Anything that yeah.
With add-ons and like deprecation, I guess movement is the add-on community. I haven't gone much into helping add-ons, but like when a new release comes out, do they basically look for outreach to like fix their problems, or recommended that like you just kind of patch your local and or just let the deprecation go until they're about to update?
Yeah. So.
I asked this because I just upgraded to 2.4 and like it broke a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And I upgraded to 2.4 specifically because Ember Data integrated, I guess, includes for site loading.
Yeah, you can, or that, you can also modularly load it now.
You can do what?
You can, instead of import like the DST structures, you can do import model from Ember Data /model.
I don't think add-on writers are supposed to be using the private APIs. They're supposed to stick to the public APIs, but when they do use one of the heavily relied on private APIs, the idea behind the LTS release is that they'll have 24 weeks of deprecation warnings to know that private API is going away.
The other thing that's nice is that the heavily used private APIs, they stopped calling private APIs and they call them intimate APIs now.
Yeah, I saw that.
They know that people use them because they have to, and there's going to be a track towards public APIs for those APIs. So hopefully you stop seeing a lot of add-on breakages because they're going to start moving all that stuff into public APIs.
Is there anyone that regularly contributes to an Ember add-on here? Is there anyone that's contributed to an Ember add-on in the past?
Like a popular one, or?
No.
I've done my fair share of jumbling up the add-on community.
Okay.
So to your point, Todd, you can kind of like, when you're choosing, I guess, which add-on to use, or if you're going to use add-on at all, there's this thing called Ember Try, which lets you run your test suite, and hopefully there is one if you're using somebody else's code. It lets you run against multiple versions of Ember, so you can like look and see like, oh, okay, well they're saying that they will run, they're at least testing against these versions, so hopefully that's what it supports. But yeah,
I mean, I was mainly just trying to clean up my deprecations and switching. I got like, it was the same notice, and it's probably just from one add-on using something that is really weird.
There are some older ones that are not well.
Container and get owner.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of those things where everybody had used the container to look up instances that Ember created. And they're like, all right, well, everyone's doing this. We're just going to make this get owner thing. That's how you can get the container for actuals, like instead of hacking your way up through the __container __. Like.
Yeah, choose your add-ons carefully.
When I think I made an add-on for some Bootstrap SaaS thing, and Katie Gallagher, Gingler, yeah, she like instantly like followed me, and I had met her before, and I wrote to her, I was like, hey, is there like a list of issues of like add-on cleanup that you have if you're tracking this stuff through Ember Observer? She didn't respond. So I was like, if she's following stuff with Ember Observer, like, I figured that there's probably a list of issues or the ability to compile issues if people are having them that, like, someone's going through and cleaning up a bunch of stuff and doing the same thing. Probably just
Go look at the Ember resource and see what they're checking.
Yeah. they're just skimming, and they're scanning.
They look
sites.
for a readme that's not the standard readme.
Yeah.
And are you committing on a semi-regular basis and other tests?
And tests that aren't the default tests.
Cool. That's all I've got. So Cam's talk will be much more interesting, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't sell you that hard at all. Here.
I'm not as positive as you are.
Ah, okay.
I keep a pretty steady like malaise going on the entire time, so it's none. Okay.
Yeah, y'all get some pizza. I don't know, we just kind of left them right here in front of us while we're sitting.
Okay, so that looks alright. That looks alright. Is this font size okay, or do you want bigger? How's that? Oh, okay. Can you guys read that okay? All the way in the back? Great. Let's do this thing. Well, are there people out of the room right now?
Chris.
I'll wait on him.
Concurrency. What?
It's a big scary word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Ruby. I want everything to be in a single thread.
Yeah, I want a global interpreter lock. And good one, Mark. You get the talk box before you drop another zinger like that.
Right. By the way, if you don't know, this is the catch box. If you want to say something interesting, say into this. Because we're being streamed and also recorded, so.
Can we? Is this actually being streamed?
I think so. We're probably going to spend some time after this just to make sure we understand. But we can meet.
Isn't Patrick doing a talk on Thursday night?
I hope so, because it's not just very simple.
So somebody's doing a talk on how to get this AV set up for TalkScope. That's super meta. I like that a lot. That's really good.
Nerd share time on how to stream.
Take notes. Okay, I think that's everybody. So yeah, this is a talk about Ember concurrency. It's a new add-on, and it's the new hotness. Everybody's talking about it. There are talks about it at every meetup, like New York and Boston and Atlanta. So it's super popular, and it's really young, so the fact that it's kind of getting a lot of talk and traction is exciting because it's pretty it's got some very interesting ideas on super common problems. Now, concurrency is in the title, and that's probably one of those big computer words where if you're anything like me, you hear it and just space out because you're like, screw that, I don't have concurrency in my application. It's just some dumb JavaScript, and things happen later. But if you're interested in an actual definition of concurrency, this is a hilarious picture from Wikipedia of this is their illustration for the dining philosopher's problem. So I was a little sick the last couple of days, and I wasn't feeling great yesterday, and I come across this picture on Wikipedia, and I was like, oh, hell yes, this is in the presentation. Look at this. So anyways, this is an example of a classical concurrency problem where, so each of these ridiculous faces represents a philosopher. Good luck, I don't know who they are. And they need 2 forks at the same time to eat their spaghetti because philosophers love getting after their spaghetti. So they got 2 forks. Not a knife. They're just going to wind it all up. That doesn't make sense, right?
There's also limited number of forks, so each. Okay.
Yeah, okay. But so the trick is a philosopher is either thinking or eating. He has to have 2 forks to eat. He can only pick up and put down forks one at a time, yada, yada, yada. So you run into this problem where the philosophers have to share their forks. Otherwise, they run into a case where every philosopher has 1 fork, they can't ever get another one, and then they starve to death. And if all the philosophers starve to death, there won't be philosophers to invent monads, and then we won't have anything to talk about on medium.com. But anyways, concurrency is a super serious problem, and whether you know it or not, it's in your application. And in JavaScript, it's kind of like baked into a lot of stuff because of JavaScript's inherent asynchronous nature. And in JavaScript, the resource that your application is sharing mostly is time, because things are just happening not from top to bottom. They're happening at some indeterminate point in the future, usually, when you're doing meaningful asynchronous programming in JS, which happens a ton. So, like I was saying, whether or not you like consider concurrency problems or think about them a lot, they are problems that you're having to deal with in your application. This is a tweet from Robin Ward, who works on Discourse. He said there's a whole category of problems in Discourse that Ember concurrency solves elegantly. And this is kind of a non sequitur because I cut out the middle tweet. I didn't even realize how big a problem I had until I saw the solution. And I had a very similar reaction. And so did actually a lot of people from the New York meetup. Like, a lot of the questions afterwards were people like, is our YouTube channel explicit? Okay, they were like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, this solves so many problems that are just everywhere that we're having to roll these ad hoc solutions for. And I kind of felt the same way. Like, when I saw a lot of the just samples that were provided, I was like, yeah, that's a thing that I'm doing manually. And then I was also like, oh, they're pointing out edge cases I'm not covering. Oh, those what those errors and bug snag are coming from? Like, this was a pretty revelatory moment for me. So yeah, the Mokti mentioned there, this is Alex Mechnier. He's the author of Ember Concurrency, and I think so far the only contributor. But he's known for a few things in the Ember community. First and foremost, he's super good at Photoshop. This is DHH. If you don't know him, I don't know, Google him or something. He created Rails, and he has a lot of opinions about not using front-end frameworks. This is a screen capture I took of a cell phone picture of somebody else's talk. This is like really deep picture inception here. It's going to blue screen the world if you do that. Don't do it. All right. He also, however, is known as Mr. Router. A long time ago, in the bad old days of 2013 or something, the Ember router was a lot different. It's kind of always had this notion of like some asynchronous stuff is going to happen, like you're going to hit an API for some JSON and then do some stuff with that JSON. But you had to do like really manual things. So he pushed forward a sort of like reworking of the router to get things to where you have these before model, after model hooks, which are inherently like asynchronous aware, and they let you just sort of chain things together without sweating it. Like, you don't have to worry about the order that the things are happening. You can just kind of trust it to get everything done for you. And it's very declarative and very simple. It also added things like event hooks, where I'm struggling to even remember how I used to handle errors from the router, but it was like some crazy thing where you just had this like global error handler that you threw every error at, and then like, if error.reason equals, like, do a thing. And that's nuts. And will transition as well is cool, because you used to not be able to prevent some kinds of transitions. And there was also a lot of craziness where like URL transitions were different than link to transitions, and it was nuts. He also did query parameters, which Greg spoke about, I guess, last month, 2 months ago, something. Yeah, they're super helpful, and I think a lot of people use them. He kind of, I remember that was in beta for a really long time. He worked on it forever. It was sort of, I think, after this whole router rewrite, but it was very helpful. And he also added, or was part of adding, aborting and retrying to transitions. So like when you're in your Ember application and going from one route to another, you sort of have these chances to like inspect the transition and say like, do we want to go through this? Like, is the user authenticated? If not, abort the transition. Or you can hang on to that transition object and potentially retry it at a later point in time, like after the authentication may or may not have happened. And so at this point, I want to focus on the abort and retry idea, because so like I was saying with the model hooks, they're all promise aware. They're all things that are supposed to return venables. So you can't abort or retry a promise like by default. You can hack some stuff if you want to, but for the most part, once you fire off a promise, and this isn't Ember specific, this is just promises at the moment, you can't cancel the code that that promise is going to execute as its callbacks. It's just going to happen, and if you didn't want it to happen, you shouldn't have typed it into the computer. You also can't like retry things, and there's not a lot of low-level ways to like manage the specifics around asynchronous actions.
So, I'm going to check my super professional notes really quickly, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, okay, so really the main point I want to make here is that promises, as they exist now, there's some talk about making them cancelable. You can't stop what happens from the promise callbacks. So, promises with asynchronous code that you're going to run into in Ember are, there are no boundaries between where you call the code that is going to be executed asynchronously and like the world that that code exists in when it actually ends up executing. So if you think about, I don't know, in the 60s, was anybody alive in the 1960s? Okay, so people used to use go-tos to program. What were go-tos like? Do you know? So before we had things like, you know, just regular like control loops and for loops and if statements and things like that, you sort of just lived in this weird Wild West where you were saying very explicit things like jump to this point in my code and just do stuff. And asynchrony in JavaScript is kind of a lot like that. In one of the other talks, Alex Matchner says that callbacks are the new go-to, and I don't know if that's necessarily accurate, but it's kind of, I like where he's going with it, because callbacks are tricky. They're like hard to reason about, right? And they're kind of ugly, and you're like throwing functions around into other functions. And while promises are like, promises specifically are way better at dealing with this kind of thing in a declarative manner, it's still tricky to reason about. Like, you're just gonna throw some behavior into a thing and trust that in the future it does some stuff. So, let's see. There's a lot of scribbles here. I must have had some trouble getting this going. Okay, all right. Yeah, so what we would kind of like is to, yeah, have promises not be canceled. I guess I have already spoken about that with the transition stuff. You also have to, if you want to like track the state of a promise, whether it has been fired off yet, whether it is currently resolving itself, whether it has been resolved, whether it has been rejected, you have to kind of do a lot of manual work to do that. Like you can manually set some values around in your code and sort of inspect those later, but that's a bummer and it's boilerplate. Like promises are supposed to be this cool primitive, and it would be nice if you had these like asynchronous bits of code and you could inspect them to know where they were at. And you also really can't constrain asynchronous code very easily. So for example, say you have like a button that when you click it, it calls some sort of save action, so it sends an API request. Your user mashes that button 10 times. It fires that API call 10 times. It's kind of hard to reason about how that's going to happen because those different requests may take different times, they may happen out of order. Who knows? It's just craziness, and it's impossible to say for sure what's going on. So, Alex Matchner heard the call, and he used Photoshop, and then also made Ember concurrency at the same time. It's crazy. So yeah, Ember concurrency tries to address some of those problems that I just listed. And so first off, it's super cool that it's an Ember add-on, and you can just write one line into the shell and get this sweet add-on. And I bring this up just because there's also a line of configuration you have to add to your Ember CLI build, or your Brock file, depending on the level of Ember CLI you're using.
Isn't that because it's using fetch?
It's because it's using generator functions, and there's like some polyfill something to, I think it's called regenerator. But yeah, so you will have to add that. I did not read this part of the documentation very carefully and was furious. Okay, so Ember concurrency gives you this thing called tasks to wrap your asynchronous code in. So the first thing that tasks give you is that they scope your asynchronous behavior. And by that I mean, we're going to jump to some code examples now. Okay, so here's a super cool webpage I made. I think it's using ULs and ULs. Okay, so all right. Here's the first example. It's a counter. It just counts up forever.
That's crazy.
Are you kidding me? Right? That's amazing. Okay, so the way this works.
It's almost you don't put it in two spans. It will not work.
This is very similar to Greg's code. Okay, so here.
Your IPO.
Listen, I can't talk about numbers without my advisors around. So oh man, I didn't do my continuing startup pivot goof. Money on the table. Okay, anyways, this is the implementation of that counter. It's pretty straightforward, right? We initialize the count to 0. We do some super stuff to make sure all of our framework code gets called. And then we fire off this increment count action. All it does is increment the property count, so that adds 1 to count. And then it scheduled that function to run a second later. It's using Ember's run loop to schedule that. You could also use like a set timeout or whatever. So as dead simple as this seems, there's actually a problem with this. So if we check out the console and say navigate to another page, okay, there's an error. So it's not a huge deal, like my application didn't break or anything, but, oh, I think I can do this as well. So we've got uncalled assertion, called set, undestroyed object. Has anyone seen that in their Ember code before? Has anyone seen it like 100,000 times in their Ember code before? Okay, great. This happens literally all the time, and it will break your tests because you've got uncalled exceptions. It will make your bug snag or whatever spam you with so many emails because you're doing this all the time because you're a bad person and you have no discipline in your code. Thanks, bug snag, for shaming me all the time. But so we can get around this. The problem is that that run loop that schedules that run later for 1,000 seconds happens after we destroy the component by navigating away from the route. So while we're here on the counter route, this component's alive, it's doing its thing, it's got all of the stuff that it needs. But when we click the home page, that component goes away, but the asynchronous code still runs on that component, and Ember hates us for doing that. So a way to get around that is, I've got a few iterations of this. Let me make sure I do it in the correct order. Okay. Here's how to get rid of this error. This is the exact same code. All we have done is add a will destroy function. This is a hook that Ember provides to you for when your component's going to be destroyed. So what we do now is we save a reference to that run that we call, and then down here we cancel that run when the component gets destroyed. So just to prove to you that that's a thing. Is there a way to clear this? Yeah. There we go. Great. Is it like that? Okay, so I'm going to replace my... Does anybody know what I called this route? Counter. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to replace our bad counter with our good counter. All right, so now we've got our component ticking away. Oh, hooray, no errors. We fixed it, so we can ship that. We're done. Our IPO just went up $10 billion. I'm buying everybody a yacht. So a thing that sucks about this, though, is that you have to remember to do this every time you do something like this. And as I was kind of saying, this is a thing that I don't always remember to do. And it's maybe not that big of a deal to have like some errors throwing around and like, man, you know, the world's not ending. But it's crummy that they happen and that the only way to get around it is to like remember that you have to do all of this like manual teardown. So a thing that's cool about frameworks is that they make you not have to think about these like crazy, like, sort of edge cases, but like boring boilerplate stuff, right? Like things that you shouldn't have to think about to write your features, to get things out the door to your users, and get all of your Meetup friends yachts. So let's see. Okay, there are obviously a few other ways that you could do this. We could do some sort of like short circuiting in this function where we could say like, we could do like if this.get is destroyed, turn 0 or something. We could do something like that, except for that's actually also lies because we're using this.get and it's going to be destroyed, so Ember's going to be mad that we called get on a destroyed object. So we could do if this dot is destroyed. That's kind of crummy too. Like, I don't know, it's littering your otherwise like declarative beautiful code with all of these checks for like, hey, what's the life cycle of this Ember component? And therein lies the problem. Your asynchronous code is not aware of the life cycle of the framework objects that you're calling it on. So one of the first things that, let's check that One of the first things that Ember Concurrency gives you is a way to scope this sort of asynchronous behavior to the life cycle of your framework objects. So an example of that is here. So this is a better version of the that's a template.
Looks better.
It's just a number. Okay, so this is a bit more verbose, but I added some spacing and stuff. This is going to be, like, the next few minutes are going to be the most code-intensive parts of this presentation. So just bear with me for a few, and then you can have your beer and space out for the rest of the time. But so what we've done here now is we've changed a couple of syntactic things. Now, rather than calling an increment count function, we get increment count and perform. An increment count is now this task thing that's taking this crazy function splat. Like, okay, this looks bizarre. What even is this? I don't care if those errors are being thrown. Why are you making me write this weird syntax? So task is a primitive from Ember Concurrency. It's the basis of everything in the add-on. Like, I can't think of anything you would be doing without it. And it lets us wrap our asynchronous code in, it lets us turn our asynchronous code into generator functions and then wrap those generator functions. So a generator function being this function splat syntax. It is in ES6, ES 2016, ES Tokyo Drift, like whatever you want to call it, it is that. It's available in Babel, and that's the feature that we enabled in the Ember CLI config. So what's cool about generator functions is they let you, they do a few things, but for our purposes, they let you make your functions block on asynchronous code. By that I mean, without this generator function and without this yield, this code and this code would run before this promise resolves. This is just a dumb promise that runs after a second and then resolves itself. So the promise does nothing. But all it does is just yields the promise, and that makes that function block. And then we just call perform again. This is like when we were recursively invoking the function earlier. So we increment the property, call it again. Now, instead of run later, we have this promise. And you'll notice that we don't have that will destroy anymore. We don't have any checks on is destroyed. Because we've wrapped it in this task, it just cancels itself when the component that it's on dies. So you can have as much crazy behavior in here as possible and not have to worry about cleaning up after yourself because tasks are just smart enough to do all of that for you. So that's really awesome. So at this point, we'll do a quick aside and talk a little bit about generator functions because they're a little crazy. So some more example stuff. I've got a button that tells you that you're a success.
You got another button?
I've got another button that tells you you failed.
Donald Trump needs both of them.
All right, so that is in the, we'll see. Okay, so that template is just these couple of buttons. Go figure. Okay. So these are our two actions that are, or two tasks rather, that we're using in lieu of actions inside of our template. Ember Concurrency provides a couple of helpers. One of them is this perform helper. You say perform, and then you pass in the name of a thing that you have declared as a task, and it sort of just works like an action would. So what our success action does is it's an immediately resolving promise. And in generator functions, you can treat these yield things like just a regular value. So we're saving it off as this value that the promise resolves success, and then we alert success. That's cool, like you can save the value of a promise, but that's really not like that great of a value add. But what it also does is let you treat promises as pretty much just like regular function calls, and you can wrap your asynchronous code that is promise-ish at the very least in try-catch blocks. So rather than doing like the crazy chaining of thens and resolves and catches and worrying about if you caught the right promise or if you've caught it twice and the second catch isn't gonna, you don't have to worry about that. You just get to write it in a very like sequential manner. So this is sort of where things go from being like callbacks being the new go-to to you just being able to write very structured code that while it's asynchronous, you get to write it and think about it like it's synchronous, like it's just executing from top to bottom. You don't have to worry about the event loop doing some stuff in the background and like when does it actually happen. You can just write your functions in a very straightforward manner. And this is so popular that they actually have another thing that's coming out in new ES. It's not, I don't think, quite available, but you'll be able to do something like this where you can declare a function as async. and then you'll be able to say await there. So that's that looks a bit better than like the function splat yield thing. At least in this case, where what you're doing is you're declaring a function to be async, and then there are values you want to await. There's currently a request for change out for Ember testing itself to use these rather than the and thens in current helpers. Suggest you look into that because it's super cool and it makes writing your Ember tests really awesome. And they're just like top to bottom, you can read them. You don't have to worry about calling back and nesting things inside of promise resolution stuff. So okay, those are generator functions. I feel like that's been a lot of code. Does anybody have any questions or anything? We good?
Sorry.
It's fine. Just box it. Talking to that box. I thought you still had beer in that and you just dumped it all over the chair.
So I guess I was thinking about the first bit of code you showed us, and
Okay.
we were looking at the code waiting 1,000 milliseconds before it executes again, and it seemed like, so if I navigate away from that page while we're waiting for the next execution, it seems like it just seems like it kind of inverts what's happening. Like initially, I guess I'm wondering if we turn it to completely synchronous code, if that changes like the behavior of the code, right? So if it's like, hey, wait for 1,000 milliseconds before you execute this, versus set this callback up to happen in 1,000 milliseconds. I don't know if it's that critical, but I wonder if there's something there. Like does that make sense? If we're turning all our code into acting synchronously, is it actually synchronous?
So kinda. I think that so in the case of this, regardless of the task stuff, which does give you the cancellation things that I was talking about, and like the smarts to automatically cancel itself when you navigate away. No, I don't think that there's any functional difference in using generator functions and writing it sequentially than the alternative. In terms of like behavior, like all other things being equal, I think that they would behave exactly the same way. I don't think I have any really great examples to like illustrate that. Are you saying that something like maybe, I don't know. What was your question?
I guess what I was thinking about is, in the first example, when we were going to, you kind of set a callback to fire in 1,000 milliseconds,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And within the meantime, you set the callback, and it hasn't been 1,000 milliseconds yet. You navigate from the page. If that happens without this system, it will still fire that callback, even though navigating from the page destroys that component.
Yeah.
Right? And therefore it's going to look for the component to fire that in, and it's not going to be there, so it's going to throw the error. Well, so does that mean it's, so we have this system, does that mean it's waiting for 1,000 milliseconds before it like sets it up? Or
Okay.
if it's waiting, if it's going to like set it up and then
I would assume that it is, and that there's kind of your answer, right? I'm going to say I assume. I'm not super sure on how this is implemented.
Basically the same thing happens, but instead of firing, instead of triggering an error when your promise resolves or your timeout comes back, it just ignores the results. So it's still going to do what you set up to do in 1,000 milliseconds, but Ember just ignores it.
Okay.
Sweet. Thank you.
Got a question.
Okay. Yeah.
This is probably the best example of generators I've seen so far.
Yeah, because it's the only one that's not like some crazy thing about generating random numbers. Like, why would everyone do that?
Yeah.
But yeah.
The position of the yield here as an assignment,
Mm-hmm.
and then using the assignment as an argument.
Yeah.
Seems
Super dope. Is that what you're trying to say? It seems really cool, right?
It's really like Ember and ES Tokyo Drift has basically like
I forgot I said that.
my brain, and like now looking at generator functions inside of like a dictionary is really crazy to me. Like looking at that code and saying that's JavaScript. Like,
Yeah, it looks kind of like words just kind of thrown at everything, right? Like there's a lot of keywords there, and I don't know how it's parsing let something equals yield new. Like that's just a lot of bare words kind of strung out there. Yeah.
Well, you could have arrow functioned the resolve promise, and that would have even like made it crazier. Like,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, it's. I took our Ruby course, and I'm realizing I took it 3 years ago, and it was when I was transitioning from Rails 3 to 4, and they're like, yeah, arrow it or not. That was
Like scopes and stuff like that, you mean? Yeah.
Like, and so, I mean, that's what I'm looking at right now, is this like very tough confusion of like words just on the screen, and I don't know why. So the idea of an assignment from a yield just seems weird.
It does, right? But isn't it cool that it just kind of works like that, and then you just move on with your life with that value?
I can't deal with it. I don't know what yield is doing.
Yeah, I don't know what yield's doing either.
My grok is broken too, so.
Yeah.
I have a question too.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
your voice will not be heard.
Yeah, I won't be heard. Is the catch that you've declared there, is that what's catching the teardown error that's being thrown, or is it the yield that's blocking?
Oh no, this is kind of irrespective of the teardown stuff. The yield is calling the promise is rejecting.
So the promise, so what you're yielding to Ember to say, like, hey, you're blocking here, like, don't do anything crazy.
Yeah,
That's what's stopping the whole kind of, you've avoided an Ember run loop getting away from you?
So this one doesn't really. So this example.
Exactly.
Let's see, where are we at?
That's
What on earth?
That's not an object.
Okay, so this example, all it does, these are just immediately resolving promises.
Right, they're just, you haven't done anything crazy with time.
I have, no, there's no time here at all. There's time in every other example, so I've tricked you by having one non-timed example. Yeah, this was just to show that you can treat the promises after a yield as just a synchronous value, and you can write your functions in just kind of, apparently not regular JavaScript, but in a regular JavaScript manner with things like try catch. And you can also assign the return value of those things to values. So yeah.
It's important that the value is the return value, not just some empty, a promise, I guess.
Sure, yeah, it's the value that that promise ultimately resolves to is what that yield statement assigns to value there.
So this really has to be synchronous, or else that wouldn't be there.
I don't know. I'm not smart enough to answer these questions, Patrick. I just have this one presentation. Let me get through it. Yeah.
Is it the yield there on line 11 that prevents, if this was actually asynchronous, prevents value from being
undefined or something?
Or it would be being a promise, I guess. 6 and 7. Right, it's the unresolved promise.
Yeah, so it is, yield basically makes these functions block at that point in time. But it's also saying that, like, hey, for us to move on from here, you need to give me, this promise over here needs to resolve something. So it needs a value. It's just aware that that's a promise. So it's saying that promise, resolve yourself, give me your return value or error reason, whichever the case may be if you're resolving or rejecting.
What if the user smashes the success button and that takes like 5 seconds?
Oh, we've got a few more of those examples coming up. We'll do that in a sec.
Oh, also you had a counter best. Are you gonna get to that one too?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried looking at what Babel actually meant? Because like yield is
it's insane garbage. It's throw a debugger on one of those, and it's like it makes this insane state machine sort of thing, and it's that is one of the downsides to this approach, but we'll get there later. Okay, cool. So that was a digression on generators. We're going to go back to our counter example. This is, again, incrementing itself after a second. So we're going to check out that counter best. And the only thing that's better about this is Ember concurrency actually gives you a timeout helper, just because making timeouts is such a handy thing in dealing with this kind of stuff. It just gives you a timeout helper, and so rather than making our own promise and specifying that it resolves after 1,000 milliseconds, we can just say timeout 1,000, and that's just a bit more terse, and it's another cool helper that this makes available to you. And
the yield's really just a pretty version of event syntax.
Yeah. In this case, for sure. Rather than chaining things onto the end of your promise, you just kind of take the value out of that promise and then run with it. Okay, but yeah, just to prove, so that's the counter best. It still works. All right, and we already talked about generators. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you can't really cancel promises at the moment. But in this case, so I believe that, let's see. Controller, what was that canceling? Okay, so here we have a function that, 3 seconds is going to be a really long time. It's going to wait for 3 seconds and then say hi. It's going to alert hi. So, all right, great. You'll notice that I'm yielding that timeout there again because, like I was saying, it's really helpful to be able to pause things at some point. But what I can do is, so I click say hi, wait 100 years for it to do something. Okay, so now what I can do is say hi, can then cancel it, and it doesn't happen. So that's awesome. So maybe if you have a case where you do want to cancel like the resolution of a promise, you can do that. Again, the promise itself still goes through, especially in the case of like sending an external API call. You can't stop that from happening. Like it's been fired off. But what you do when that call comes back, you can control. You can also use Ember concurrency to monitor. I'll show you how that actually worked before we go away. This is another helper that Ember concurrency gives you. It's called cancel all, and you say cancel all and give it the name of a task. The reason you have to say cancel all is that, so let's go back to the canceling example, and say I mash this a few times, and I still just hit cancel once, and then nothing happens. So all instances of that task get canceled, not just one. There are ways where you can like sort of save off one instance of a task and do that manually, but this seems like the most useful way to do that.
Is that a different syntax for the task?
So I'm just saving off a function here as a generator function and then passing that in there.
Oh.
I think I'm copying and pasting this from later examples. So, all right, great. So now I'm going to show you how you can look at the state of one of these tasks. So this is state. All right, so we're just looking at is running and is idle, and those are actual properties on that task option that we are sending back. So it's running, and then after 3 seconds, it will go back to idle. Well, after we cancel our alert. But so this is great for your UI. If you want to have like different button states or whatever the case may be, you can just inspect this really easily rather than having just hand-rolled stuff that you have to do that isn't fun. This is another way to cancel. Let's see how that's done. So this is just a regular Ember action cancel. So this gets the say hi action and then calls cancel all on it. So say hi here, it's one of these tasks, and tasks have this cancel all available. All right, and now stuff's about to get ridiculous. So another thing, and this for me is like the most mind-blowing of all of the things he adds, is it gives you a way to manage the concurrency, or like, yeah, manage the concurrency of the asynchronous behavior that you're working with here in tasks. So let's see what we have. What does that route look like? Okay, all kinds of stuff. All right, so, oh yeah, this is, I guess, why I saved that variable off. Okay, so we've got a few different things that we're appending to the end of tasks here. We've got restartable, in queue, and drop. So for starters, we have this boring one. That's the same thing you've seen before. It waits a second and it says hi. So if I click it like 3 times, we get hi, and hi, and like 4 times. You'll notice that every time I clicked, the next alert was immediately up. It didn't like wait another second. Those were all just sort of happening and then alerting themselves. So here's a restartable action. It, I guess, waits a second and goes. So this one, I can click as many times as I want, and we don't get anything until I stop clicking it, and then we get that. So if you've ever had to implement debouncing in your application with ember.run.debounce, which is another thing I feel like I always have to do, this just does it for you. Like, that's the craziest thing, that it just makes it restartable like that. Now, we could, so the reason it's restarting like that is that we're waiting for a second, and then so every time we call that task over and over again before this timeout promise is resolved, it's just canceling previous invocations of that task I'm throwing another one on there. So you're guaranteeing that the resolution of that promise only happens once. All right, and then there's in queue. So I will do that one. I guess I did it twice. Beat. Okay, so that queues all of the promises up one after another. So there was a second pause there. So let's see if I can get this 3 times. So this waits a second, waits a second. So this gives you a queue of promises. So if you, I apparently always click it 4 times and say I clicked it 3 times. So if you've got like some sequential promise stuff that you want to do, and there are ways to get around this currently, like there's this crazy Robert Jackson gist where he like, I don't know, it's nuts. We can look at it in a minute because it's really cool. But it's great that like we added a word there and we just ensured that all of those promises happen like serially rather than like sort of all at the same time. Like that's nuts. And then drop is, I'll click this one a few times, but it just happens the once. So that makes it so that every time you click that button, any future occurrences of that task just get trashed, that only the one happens. So it's a bit like restartable. It's a way of managing that only one instance of that task actually gets to happen, but rather than just postponing forever until you've like really clicked like you mean it, it just trashes all the ones that you keep clicking. Okay, so these are all sort of focused on doing one task at a time. Maybe you want to do like 3 instances of the task at the same time. And I could not make examples that were as good as this, so we are just going to go to a blank web page. Okay, sweet. All right, so for sure check out the source code. This is just emberconcurrency.com. The source code here is ridiculous. The examples that have like code is also the code that's being executed for the components. It's bananas, but it's really cool. So what this does is, so this is restartable. If you remember, that was the one where I was clicking it repeatedly and only the last click was the one that went through. So what this lets me do is, okay, I'll clear it again and run this. So this is running, that's running, and that's running. So all of those get to finish because I gave them enough time. But in this case, so say I click it that 4th time, the first one gets canceled. Because it's still running, when we add another task there, it cancels the first one and appends this to the end. So this is saying that make sure that only up to 3 instances of this task can be running at the same time. So maybe you have like a shared resource like Philosopher Forks or WebSockets or computers, I don't know. You can ensure that you're not like oversaturating those resources by using something like this to make sure that you're only doing a certain number of things at the same time. So similarly, this is in queuing. And then so you see all of those start waiting. So once 3 are running, it then just starts popping things into pushing things into the queue. So that's really awesome. Drop is similar. This will allow 3 before it starts dropping forever. So this is nuts, right? Like at this point, this is kind of like a, oh my gosh, do I have anything that I will ever use this for? I don't honestly know. But this is really, 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 really cool stuff. So I think that's maybe the end of my examples. Does anyone remember?
You said, I didn't know I had this problem.
Well, right? Yeah. So personally, the things I found very useful are just restarting, dropping. I haven't really in-queued anything yet. I don't have any use cases for that. But canceling is cool, but it's really neat that this is an add-on that if you just configure it correctly, it just does the canceling for you. So you don't have to sweat stuff like that. Like that's really awesome.
When are you using this? Is it mostly like legitimately just button clicking, handling?
Well, this is like the easiest way to.
Right, but I'm kind of wondering about other examples of when that I might.
Got some serious crackheads that are running this app. 3 in the morning.
Okay, the hell of it is, Patrick. They always tell me they're going to click the button 3 times. And then the sons of bitches click it 4 times every time. I don't even know.
But yeah,
okay, so you want an example? Do you want like a serious business example?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, great. Let's see if we can find it. Did I just stop using my slides? Let me finish my slides and we'll mess around for a bit. Was that everything? Okay, so some warnings. I said earlier, this is only like a few weeks old. It's got a pretty good test suite in that it's got tests, but there may be bugs. Like this is difficult stuff to reason about, so I wouldn't like replace everything in your application with this like today. But I don't know about you, like I am looking for reasons to use this. Like, screw the state machine craziness that gets generated. I want to drop these things in my application all over the place. And here's some more info links. I will post these in Slack or something. But so the Ember concurrency homepage is that page I was at just now. It's got a lot of ridiculous examples. You know how you have to jumble a bunch of words. We'll just go through the examples on the page. They're better than
You
mine.
can also look at the presentation on GitHub. I think it's an example of using it, right? Like this talk.
Sick. Where did anything go? Stupid presentation mode.
Like, would it, it seems like we're
Stupid
using the
Safari.
same promises over and over again. You know, what I mean is, if we were to, if I had something that cascaded multiple different kind of promises, like for some reason I was going to try to asynchronously persist to a lot of different resources to my API, like, and I just like threw this slew of promises in the air. What am I gonna like aggregate those and say like drop them all if one thing didn't?
You can. I think you could use something like promise.all inside of that task and do something like that for sure.
Yeah.
Can you have multiple yields in the same block?
Huh. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could just yield your two promises in a row like that.
You could also do that for sure.
I mean, yeah. So I could just use ES and
But it's still not gonna ship. It's still not gonna help you ship. Like if say you built like a cart or a checkout process, like somebody like just mashes the button, you're still gonna ship 10 times, right?
Yeah, I mean, I work on an e-commerce application. Boy, that's a thing that people love doing. They love making sure they confirm that order. They've got to confirm it so hard.
Yeah, but,
but yeah.
basically still is like it sends off the post.
Oh, I agree. I agree. This
it's
isn't.
managing the UI afterwards, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. Exactly.
I mean, it's just something to keep in mind.
Well,
Oh yeah.
there's
Definitely. Don't.
You cancel all the ones that come after it. That's how it helps out with that problem.
I like disabling button.
Yeah. So that's also a very valid use case for this, though. You could use that state to go back in there and disable that button.
Block
What would you do?
alert.
Would you do the drop, or would it resolve the promise first and then like discard?
So I
or would it
believe.
never actually add the promise?
Can't do anything.
I believe using drop will resolve the promise, but then won't do any of the things in the promise callbacks. It won't run the resolve or reject callbacks.
But like basically you want it to actually never run the promise.
Yeah, I mean, that would be sweet if you could do that, but I don't know.
Basically, this is just to keep your users.
Just kidding.
Actually, I think charging all of our customers 10 times is the best business model I've ever heard of. We get so rich.
There's your startup.
But so yeah, so like the button clicking seems like a pretty great use case for this. You know, clicking buttons, people like to click buttons. I want to click buttons, especially in the UI doesn't change. But like, if you know, what else is there? I want some other reason to use it.
So
I mean, I told you I'd get there. I'm not lying.
Oh, I didn't know.
Give me a minute.
I thought maybe we were trying to slip time.
Okay, so this is Alex's blog post explaining that? Was somebody talking? Sorry.
I just like what always happens to me is I have stuff that dynamically gets loaded on the page. So it makes a AJAX call, and then if someone clicks away and they come back, then you get that error message. You're doing something with a destroyed object. I think that's like this is like the problem I didn't know I had.
We had those checks everywhere.
Yeah, I ran like a quick grep through my, it's not like a giant code base, but I mean tens of thousands of lines, and it was just like all over the place, like is destroyed checks, and some of them were just from like months ago. I was like, oh, I forgot to put that in there. I must have seen this one time and been like, not if you're destroyed. And then in some places I used like the will destroy hook. It was very inconsistent and kind of crazy. Okay, so this is a blog post that he wrote, which is, it's kind of more words than his example website, but it has links to his example website. And he also spoke at the New York City February Meetup, which was last week or a couple of weeks ago. It's really super good, and he's talking at this week's Ember Global Meetup about it. So if you want to see what I think is the mother of all of these examples, I don't know how to get to it. Let's see.
Is this in the Ember Weekly?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Alright, it's the link that I skipped over.
This is the good one.
Well, so like when I first started hearing about this, I was like, yeah, concurrency, no thanks. Like, I'm gonna mess around with Flexbox. Like, I'm not gonna do this craziness. Man, let's see. Does docs sound good? Oh, yeah, this may be it actually.
Talk.
Okay, all right. So here is a pretty cool example. These are buttons that when you hold them, they just increment this number. But the longer you hold it, the faster it increments. And then you let go and it stops. And there's a decreased functionality as well. So that's ridiculously terse for that behavior, right? Like, I don't know. If you were writing something like that, otherwise, so sometimes your users hold on buttons instead of just clicking them. Okay, so there is an example. Here is an example of Ajax throttling, which if you just read the title like I did, that's what this is. Okay, so I guess this is just making a series of Ajax calls, and it's limiting the number of calls to a certain number. This doesn't look that cool, so we're not going to do that anymore.
What's the power select on?
Yeah, we'll get there. That's the coolest one by far. It's really awesome. This one's empty. Okay. Oh yeah, child task is another thing. You can nest tasks inside other tasks. If the parent task cancels, all the kid tasks cancel, which is pretty helpful. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Couple of real world-ish things. Loading UI. You have to put spinners everywhere. People love spinners. But that's very simple, right? Like this is just, I assume it's observing the is idle / is running stuff. So that's neat. Okay, here we go. Here is a text box that, as you, it's like an autocomplete searching text box for, I guess, GitHub repos or something. As you type in words here, it waits for you to wait 250 milliseconds between typing before it makes an API call, so it's not just flooding the GitHub API every time you press a letter. So I do that. Darn. Look at me. Oh, yeah, get out my Vim plugin. All right.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so that happened. Yeah, okay, cool. How'd that guy get before me in Vimember? What? Okay, so I hit back or something. Okay, right. And then look at how much code that is. It's like 97% comments because he's writing actual paragraphs for comments. And then it's so short. Like, so, yeah, it's ridiculous. And he's actually turning this into a task here as well, this get JSON. So I guess instead of just plain old $sign get JSONing, he's making his own task out of that because that gives him that awesome try-catch stuff. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, so that component right there is like, if you were doing that with manual debounces, if you were doing that with manual promise stuff that like had to set some other property somewhere to do things, it'd be a lot more code than that. It would also be, I don't know, you'd have to worry about a lot more edge cases. And here, you just don't have to. So it's pretty cool. All right, that's my talk.
Right.
Anything else? Okay.